We've now got a component put together that we can use to experiment with the lists on. So let's get a better idea of how we build a list with React. Okay, so here's the general idea. We're always going to start off with some array of records that we're going to want to represent on the screen in some fashion. So this might be an array of objects, where each object has maybe a name property. So maybe every object inside of here represents a friend or something like that. We could also have an array of numbers, or an array of strings, or an array of absolutely anything. But in general, when we are building out a list with React Native, our starting point is an array that we want to build out into a series of different React components and show to the user. In order to take an array like this and turn it into a series of React components, we're going to use another one of those primitive elements from React Native. The primitive element we're going to use is called the FlatList. So we're going to use the FlatList primitive element to take an array of records and turn it into some list to display on the screen of our device. When we make use of the FlatList element, we are always going to pass in two different props. Remember, props are configuration options we specify when we write out a JSX element. The first required prop is called data. So we have to pass in an array of records that we want to turn into a collection of React elements to show on the screen. Now, FlatList doesn't technically just figure out for us how to display each of these different elements. Instead, it's up to you and me to provide a function called the renderItemProp that's going to be called with every individual element out of that array, and it's going to be up to you and me to return from that function a little bit of JSX that describes how we want to show each element on the screen. We'll see how to write that out in just a moment, because when I use words to describe that, it's a little bit confusing. Now, the last thing I want to mention really quickly is that if you're coming from the world of React.js from the web, you might be used to mapping over an array of data to build out a list. So in the React Native world, rather than doing that, we use the FlatList element instead. And the reason for that is that the FlatList has a bunch of optimizations built into it to render a huge list of elements on a mobile device in a very performant fashion. And we'll describe how that optimization works in just a little bit. Okay, so now that we've introduced the FlatList element, we'll take a quick pause and then come back to our list screen in the next video and get a better idea of how to use it.